So in today's video, I wanted to discuss drying aids, why you might want to use them, some pros, some cons, and also some examples as well. So I'll first start off with talking about what a drying aid actually is. So this is a chemical that you spray onto the paintwork, your drying towel, or both, in order to add some more lubrication to the towel to reduce the risk of marring during the drying stage, and also to add some additional properties to the paintwork, for example some more slickness, gloss, or a boost to the water beading as well. Now there are a range of chemicals that you can use as drying aids, and you won't really find a product listed as a drying aid if you go on any resellers' websites, but these could be rinseless washes or waterless wash products, quick detailers, and even spray sealants. So I'm going to start off with the advantages of using a drying aid, and the first one, the main one really, is that it will add some extra lubrication and allow your towel to glide a bit more easily over the panel. The aim here is to reduce towel marring. So twist loop drying towels, for example, which are probably the most popular option on the market, do have potential to mar the paintwork, particularly if you take a dry towel and drag it across that panel. So using a drying aid, of course, helps to reduce that risk. If you are using a drying aid for that particular purpose, then the best options to look at would be rinseless washes or quick detailers, as these are going to provide more lubrication than a spray sealant, for example. Another reason that you might want to use a drying aid is to add some top-up protection. So this can be in the form of water beading, but also a boost to gloss and slickness as well. Rather than going around the car with the drying towel and then going in afterwards with the quick detailer on a microfiber towel and having to buff that on and off, doing this step during that drying stage means you don't have to spend any extra time on your car while still getting those benefits. I also find it useful in summer if I'm working on a car in direct sunlight when the panels are starting to get a bit hotter. In these cases, using either a spray and rinse sealant before drying a car or a sealant on a dry panel after drying just aren't really that practical, and I can run into streaks and a lot of issues when I do this. So instead, adding a little bit of spray sealant to the paintwork and the towel as I'm going round drying those panels means the risk of me introducing any streaks is a lot lower, and if I can't get any shade on the car, then it's my best option if the car does need some protection on it. The final advantage that's worth discussing is that it can also increase the absorbency of the towel, particularly at the start of the drying process. So dry towels don't tend to pick up water as well as slightly damp towels, the reason being that water has cohesive properties, so a slightly damp towel will help to draw in more water. So priming the towel with your drying aid can obviously help to kickstart that process and make the drying process a bit more effective on those first few panels. Quick tip, if you don't want to use a drying aid but are finding that issue, that your towel's struggling to pick up as much water before it gets a bit damp, is to dry the windows first, as you don't run the risk of marring the finish on glass, so it can allow you to get your towel a little bit damp before you start dragging it across the paintwork. Alternatively, just give your towel a quick mist with your pressure washer to achieve the same effect. So now onto the disadvantages of using a drying aid, and there are some that are definitely worth mentioning. So the first one is that if you are using it with the intention to apply top-up protection to the car, just keep in mind that the protection won't be as strong as if you applied it to a dry panel. You are essentially diluting that product, so it won't offer those characteristics to the same degree. This is fine if your car is well protected and you are just using it for those light top-up purposes, but if you need to apply a decent layer of protection, then using either a spray and rinse sealant before drying or using a sealant on a dry panel afterwards is going to achieve generally a better effect. The second disadvantage is that you can get some streaks when using a drying aid. Now this generally depends on what product you're using. If you're using a waterless or rinseless wash, or most quick detailers, then you shouldn't really have this problem. Generally tends to be if you're using a heavier duty sealant. The reason being is that you're not really buffing that product as much on the panel. You're just really supposed to spray it on and wipe as you would normally without doing any extra buffing. So if you do want to use a sealant for this purpose and you're finding that you are getting some streaks, then consider diluting that down. Start with a 1-to-1 dilution and go from there, and you should be able to get to a point where you're not getting any streaks left behind. The third disadvantage of using a drying aid is it can clog up your towel. If, for example, you do use a heavy duty sealant or a quick detailer with a decent amount of protection in it, then that can bond to your towel, and because those chemicals are hydrophobic, they can essentially coat the fibres of your towel and cause that to become more hydrophobic and less effective at drying your vehicle. Using rinseless washes, which tend not to have protection in them, will have this issue much less, but if you are using drying aid to add more slickness, gloss and protection, then that's not going to help you as much. If you do still want to use a sealant or a quick detailer with those hydrophobic properties as your drying aid, then I would recommend sticking your towel in a bucket of clean water after you've used it, and then as quickly as you can after that, get it in that washing machine, and that should help to reduce those problems. Now, the final disadvantage that I definitely think is worth mentioning is that in order to use a drying aid, you are going to have to wipe your car with the drying towel and drag it across that paintwork. Now, on sensitive finishes, even though the drying towel is lubricated with that drying aid, it can still cause some marring, so it's not something that I do on my MX-5, for example, which has very soft paintwork, as whenever I'm using a drying towel on that, I like to just pat it dry. So this of course reduces the movement and the risk of inflicting any marring. This patting technique wouldn't be effective with a drying aid, so if you do have sensitive paintwork, then I don't really think the drying aid method is particularly helpful, and just patting your car with your drying towel or using a car dryer or deionised water to rinse the car down and just leave it are going to be better approaches to keeping your car swirl free. So I hope this video has given you a little bit more information on drying aids and whether they're going to be a suitable option for yourself. If you have found this video helpful, then it would be brilliant if you could drop it a like, and thanks very much for watching.